Allegations of cheating and sporting corruption have followed the revelation that Donald Trump intervened in the World Cup to overturn the suspension of an American player. But the ramifications of this unprecedented event might far outlast the Cup. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris, and you're listening to the Morning Edition from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. Today, Sydney Morning Herald Deputy Editor Nick Ralston and North America correspondent Michael Koziol on the worldwide cheers against the USA that followed this intervention, and if it marks a nadir for Trump supporters. Welcome, Nick and Michael, to the podcast.
Good to be here.
Thanks, Samantha.
Okay, so I don't know why I'm surprised that Donald Trump has yet again intervened in a pretty remarkable way on the world stage, and yet here, of course, we are. So, Nick, let's start with you. What happened with the American president and this red card incident at the World Cup?
Yeah, so the US had been having something of a successful World Cup. They are obviously one of the three co-hosts, a lot of pressure and expectation on them, but they had performed reasonably well. They had that unfortunate 2-0 win over the Socceroos. They got through the group stage. They did lose to Turkey, but did it reasonably easily in what was a competitive group. They played their first knockout round of 32 game against Bosnia, and they were sort of cruising in that as well. Florian Balogun, who's been something of a sort of a standout for the US team, scored one, had one disallowed, but then in the 61st minute, got into a bit of a tangle with a Bosnian defender, landed awkwardly sort of on the back of his leg towards his ankle. The referee took a look and gave him a red card. He was sent off. There was a lot in the US media after that about how there was sort of no real avenue for the US to appeal this decision. And it looked as if the US would go into their next round of 16 knockout game against Belgium without their star attacker. And then sort of somewhat out of nowhere, we got this sort of breaking news came to our phones saying that Balogun would be able to play against Belgium. And Donald Trump was very quick to sort of congratulate and thank FIFA for doing so, which I think got everyone's sort of suspicions up.
Absolutely. I mean, I've heard people refer to this as a presidential pardon in terms of his sway in getting this red card overturned. But Michael, I think it's fair to say there's a lot more to it than just Trump's intervention, right? So tell us, I guess, about how big of a governmental effort was this to get the red card overturned?
It was a full court press. So Andrew Giuliani, who is the guy that Donald Trump put in charge of the White House World Cup task force. He's the son of former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, also a Trump acolyte, and used to be one of his lawyers. Anyway, so Andrew Giuliani, in an interview with ESPN in the last 24 hours, basically said, look, as soon as we got on the plane after that Bosnia game, we were on the phone to lawyers, contacting lawyers, trying to work out how to appeal this decision. He was on the plane with Howard Lutnick, Donald Trump's commerce secretary, another well-connected guy, another billionaire. So they were contacting lawyers. Other people got involved. The New York Times has done some reporting about a guy called Scott Goodwin, another rich guy, hedge fund manager, big soccer donor here in the US. And he's the guy, apparently, according to the New York Times, who brought to the White House's attention these former old accusations against the referee in that US-Bosnia game, Rafael Klaus. And Trump had something to say about that today during his little Q&A in the White House, basically saying, this guy's very suspect.
And this referee, who is a little bit suspect, if you check his past. I don't want to say that because I don't like to create controversy, but very suspect.
Of course, those allegations were not upheld in the end. He was cleared, but Trump brought it up anyway. So there was a big effort, lots across government, lots of people involved. And, to be fair, the US soccer team is allowed to appeal this decision. They're allowed to put their case to FIFA, but it seems in this case they got a lot of help from people throughout the government, including, obviously, as we've spoken about, from the very, very top of the US government in Donald Trump, and that is extremely unusual.
How do you penalize him for a game that hasn't been played yet? It's very unfair. You can't do that. So Yes, I asked for a review by FIFA. I spoke to a man who's highly respected, and by the way, whose level of respect has gone up tenfold. And he was good before this started, but he really pushed it in this country. I'm the one that got them to do it.
And so, Nick, I want to turn to you because, of course, the end result was that Balogun was allowed to play in this match against Belgium, which kicked off on Tuesday morning our time. So how much of a part, I guess, did Donald Trump's intervention play in him actually playing this match?
Look, I think everything indicates that Trump's intervention played a major role in him being able to play. But I think probably FIFA's been saved by the Belgian football team. Belgium winning 4-1 means the US are out of the tournament. And look, I don't think it ends the discussion there. I think that there will be a lot more of this still to play out. We've had some pretty senior figures within the game, including UEFA, which is the European body that oversees football there. Thomas Tuchel, the coach of England, pretty much any other sort of big name manager who's given a press conference since this decision's been made has come out and spoken out against it. So in some ways, probably the integrity of the tournament's been saved by Belgium beating the US 4-1. Balogun did play. He didn't play very well. The US didn't play very well. So I think it's, the US was already sort of, I guess, on many Australian soccer fans' enemy list. There was a lot of tension and build up between Australia and the Socceroos for that clash in Seattle. So I don't know if there'll be too many sympathetic Australian soccer fans with how this has played out for the US. But I think that this has definitely overshadowed their performance. And I don't know if there was many, if any, neutral soccer fans that would have been on the US side today. So, look, it's all come to nothing, really, except that it's put FIFA's integrity under spotlight and the influence of Trump on FIFA on the spotlight as well.
And just to play devil's advocate for just a moment, Nick, I mean, is there any chance that Trump actually did have a case? Is there a case to be made that the referee did err in issuing Balogun with a red card? Because I certainly have seen sport commentators, some of them saying that he thought the ref made the wrong decision, although my understanding is within the world of FIFA, there's an understanding it's subjective and that if the ref calls a red card, it's stood by and that you don't appeal it. Obviously, that's not what happened in this case. But does Trump have a case?
Well, look, there's been 13 red cards this World Cup, which is quite a lot by tournament standards. This is the only one that people are talking about. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. If it's a red card, it's a red card. The video VAR were the one that sort of awarded it, decisions made, and you sort of have to accept that decision. Football's built on discussion and controversy around decisions like this. And I think that if you're going to have instances like this, I think it's the first time since 1962 that a red card's ever been suspended like this. And like I said, there's been 30 in this tournament. There's probably cases where also question marks have been put on some of those, the other 12. But I think once the red card's given, then that's sort of the final decision. The 1 game suspension should have stood and this should never have happened. I think everyone was sort of, totally blown away by what has gone on here, and Trump picking up the phone to Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA. Have not heard of this happening ever before, and it's hard to imagine that it would happen possibly with any other 2 people except for Trump and his mate Johnny Infantino. And it sort of goes to this, I guess, feeling that the Americans, aren't a serious football or soccer nation and don't understand how the sport works, which has sort of been a bit of an undercurrent, a bit of Euro snobbery possibly towards North American soccer fans. I think there's sort of a feeling that the Americans don't understand how the game properly works, and this is not the done thing in football.
After the break.
If you like Trump, you think he did a great thing standing up for his country and going into bat for one of his countrymen. And if you don't like Trump, you think that he's, embarrassed the country on the world stage yet again.
Virginia Giuffre helped vanquish a prince and a millionaire.
And I won't stop fighting. I will never be silenced.
But one of her toughest battles was a very private one.
It was the worst thing that could have happened to her. Her children were her life.
Virginia, a podcast from the newsrooms of The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald and WA Today. Coming soon.
So, Michael, I just want to turn to you now because we've talked a little bit about in this conversation about how there's probably not many Australian fans that are going to be mourning what's happened here and whether this sort of, I guess, continues on. This controversy lives on, even though, of course, America's lost the match. Might, for instance, this prevailing anti-USA sentiment that's resulted from Trump's intervention, like, could that cost Trump politically?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, I think in the US, opinion has been settled on Trump for a very long time, probably for about 10 years. And there's very few things that kind of move the dial on him personally among Americans. I mean, if you like Trump, you think he did a great thing standing up for his country and going into bat for one of his countrymen and, for the hope of the side. And if you don't like Trump, you think that he's, embarrassed the country on the world stage yet again. And, there are some people that talk about the Trump curse when it comes to sport, mainly to do with the Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL, who, whenever Trump gets involved, seem to start losing. But, look, I think people who believe that Donald Trump has brought the US into disrepute around the world have thought that for a long time. So I don't necessarily see any political consequences for him. I mean, in terms of ongoing consequences in the tournament itself, there's an English player who got a red card in their match last night against Mexico. And I don't know if anything's come of that in the last couple of hours, but England, British politicians are now saying, well, we need to challenge this red card ahead of England's next match. So, all red cards are now kind of up in the air. Why don't we put a challenge forth and see what we can get, see if we can get the suspension overturned? And who knows what could happen in the next, week or two down the pointy end of the tournament. So, yes, there could be flow-on effects within the World Cup itself.
And Mike and Nick, just to wrap up, I'll throw this last question to both of you. I'm just wondering if you could reflect, I guess, on just how this story has blown up. Because, of course, we've seen allegations of sporting corruption and that the integrity of this particular World Cup has been absolutely harmed by this incident. But I'm just wondering, I guess, about political reflections on this. Is this yet another example of this American president, wielding his power in ways that are unprecedented in American presidency? Do you think this is how people are feeling it? I don't know if you've been noticing that on the ground. Nick, you were just covering the World Cup in America and elsewhere. And Michael, you, of course, are in Washington now, but you were at the match, I believe, in Seattle. Like, what are people feeling?
Look, there was a lot of concerns going into this World Cup about certain issues, I think, about how some countries would be treated. We saw a lot of talk about, the Iranian football team and what they've had to do. They weren't obviously allowed to stay in America. They were going to be based in Arizona. They were forced to go to Mexico and fly in and out, the day of the match or the day after the match, etc. And I think talking to people that were over there for the World Cup, I think there was sort of a bit of an apprehension before the tournament began, but there wasn't really any sort of sight or mention of Donald Trump in relation to the World Cup up until this moment. And look, the tournament has not been without its faults, and there has been, some controversies and that in the background. But by and large, I think fans were sort of happy that this hadn't become a Donald Trump circus and that the football was allowed to play out. That's obviously all changed now in the last sort of 48 hours or so. But yeah, it's unfortunate. They had controversies around the World Cup in 2018 in Russia, in 2022 in Qatar, and I think when this one was awarded, the North America was sort of seen as going to be the sort of more straightforward World Cup. And obviously world events in the 10 years since the US and Mexico and Canada were awarded the tournament changed that considerably. But look, I think this has left a bit of a sour taste in people's mouths. And like I said, I think if the US had won today, then I think it would also be, a real sort of it would have been interesting to see where the tournament went from there, given all the outrage, especially from Belgium and UEFA about the decision. So I think in many ways we're fortunate the US are out of the tournament, and hopefully the rest of it can proceed without too many other interventions.
And Michael, what about you? What are your reflections on this?
Well, it was reported a few days ago that Donald Trump and possibly J.D. Vance were going to be at that game in Seattle that we just watched, the US and Belgium game. That obviously didn't come to fruition, but it would have been fascinating if he had attended to see what reception he would have received. He is still, as far as we know, due to present the trophy to the winner up in New Jersey on, July 18? So, it'll be interesting to see what reception he gets then from the two non-USA teams, whoever they turn out to be. I mean, look, I think in some ways Donald Trump lifts the lid on the way the system always has worked. The way the power often operates in the background. Powerful, wealthy, connected people call each other up and ask for favors and skirt the rules. This happens all the time. With Donald Trump, it's just a lot more overt. And then he'll go into the Oval Office and just blurt out the details about exactly what transpired, as if, it was totally fine and there was nothing untoward about it. And possibly that's because he believes that there wasn't. He obviously recognized it was not a good thing for him to be seen to be pressuring Gianni Infantino, because he said, he stressed, I didn't tell him what to do. I can't tell him what to do. But he was perhaps not alert to the fact that, him as president ringing up the head of FIFA and requesting a review and, whatever else he said, carries a certain weight to it, let's say. So I think in some ways what we see from Donald Trump is the way the system has often works, but in a much more extreme way. He is willing to push the boundaries of his power and of the office as far as they can possibly be pushed. And when we see that up close, it is pretty ugly.
Thank you so much, Michael and Nick, for joining us.
Thank you.
No problem.
In other news today, one of the nation's chief forecasters has predicted that Australia faces its longest stretch of subpar economic growth since the early 1990s recession. Days before a Central Coast mother allegedly murdered her son, caseworkers warned it was only a matter of time before a child died in the New South Wales region that's afflicted by drugs, mental health problems, and a child protection regime in shambles. And midlife women used to report higher satisfaction with their bodies than younger women, but a new study has found that this has changed as grey divorce and anti-aging messages have increased. You can read more at theage.com.au or smh.com.au. Today's episode was produced by Chi Wong. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, and our podcasts are overseen by Lisa Muxworthy and Tom McKendrick. If you like our show, follow The Morning Edition and leave a review for us on Apple or Spotify. Thanks for listening.